I'm Lana Zach. Thanks for joining us here. The CBS News Weekender starts now. An earthquake rattles New York and beyond. We'll speak with some scientists about the seismic activity.
This is one of the largest earthquakes on the East Coast to occur in the last century.
President Biden vows to move heaven and earth to rebuild the Key Bridge in Baltimore. How much time and money the city really needs to fully reopen the port.
We will not rest until the cement has dried and the entirety of a new bridge.
And are you ready for the total solar eclipse? You'll need glasses and clear skies. What else you need to know before Monday's major event? We'll have it all for you. But first, a 4.0 magnitude aftershock has rocked parts of the Northeast just hours after the region was shaken by a rare 4.8 magnitude earthquake. Take a look at this EarthCam video of the New York City skyline. The quake Friday morning was felt across at least 10 states in the mid-Atlantic. JFK and Newark airports were forced to temporarily ground flights while crews checked for any damage or debris. CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett has more.
It was the major shake that caused a morning shock to most of the Northeast. The epicenter of a magnitude 4.8 earthquake just 50 miles west of New York City in Lebanon, New Jersey.
I've never felt an earthquake, so it was a little scary. It was a little weird.
Is that an earthquake?
The power of the quake split this road in Union, ruptured a water main in nearby Chester, and forced the evacuations of families in Newark after their homes were deemed unsafe. Students at Fair Lawn High took shelter in campus hallways.
This is one of the largest earthquakes on the East Coast to occur in the last century.
The earthquake hit New York City as well, which has more than 1 million buildings.
We saw the buildings moving and everything, though. It was kind of scary.
Cameras showing center field at Yankee Stadium bounced during batting practice, and the Statue of Liberty's live camera rocked. And while New York's governor says there were no reports of significant damage, she warned the threat may not be over.
If there is an aftershock, people are encouraged to drop and to cover.
Major earthquakes in the northeast of the U.S. are rare, the last one occurring in 2011 at a 5.8 magnitude. It was felt from Florida to Maine. New Jersey sits in the Ramapo Fault Zone, which stretches from Pennsylvania to New York. It is one of the longest fault zones in the region.
We know that after a large earthquake, or even a moderate earthquake, that it causes this change in the stresses on the faults. And so we typically see more earthquakes after the first one.
And Errol joins me now. Errol, it seems like the new greeting among New Yorkers is, did you feel it? So I'm going to pose that question to you. Did you feel it? Did you feel the aftershocks? And how are people around you reacting?
Hey there, Lana. Great to see you. Yes, I did feel it, but here's what's interesting. I think my wife and I are a great example of the range of reactions people have. I thought it was similar to a truck moving by our apartment building and something quite typical. She, seated in one place and seeing lamps move and pictures wobble, was really unnerved by it and was certain that it was a sustained earthquake, and she was a bit more unnerved by it than I was. And I think what's happening right now in the New York metro area is there is this collective sigh of relief because there does not appear to be any injuries or major damage from the quake. But northern New Jersey, as you saw in that story, really got the brunt of the punch of this thing with the epicenter under northern New Jersey at that Ramapo fault line. There are some historic buildings there that experienced some damage. There were roads that had some cracks, a water main broke, and it could have been much worse. I'll also share with you, I was worried early this morning that anyone in the middle of a sensitive surgery perhaps would experience some adverse effects. There are reports from the Philly Inquirer that a man outside of Philadelphia was in the middle of his vasectomy when this earthquake hit, and it was so powerful. This quake was felt from Philadelphia to Maine, and they had to stop the procedure as the room started to shake. He has since said that they finished the procedure and he's fine, but city inspectors are still checking everything out here, looking at critical infrastructure just to make sure there aren't any hidden fractures or damage that we can't see with the naked eye.
Yeah, that is a dramatic story, my friend. So I'm glad to know that he is okay and that it sounds like everybody else is. And given that we're not really used to a lot of seismic activity out here, it was really stunning seeing some of those images in your reporting of people whose homes had to be evacuated from their homes, some of that damage. What can you tell us about about how those people will be affected and when they may be able to return home.
Yeah, I think that as we go into the evening, from what I've seen, no reports of gas leaks have been confirmed. People who have been evacuated from buildings, that was just as a precaution. They've been able to return, but within just the past hour or so, we did feel one of these aftershocks. Its preliminary magnitude is 4.0, and the governor was warning everybody in New York State that you very well may experience aftershocks. The U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, says that statistically speaking, within the next week, there's a high probability of a magnitude 3.0 or 4.0 quake. And so as inspectors look at the Brooklyn Bridge behind me and tunnels, and they look for these hidden fractures and fissures, those aftershocks, while not causing any widespread destruction, can be damaging on the small scale. And this is the most densely populated part of the country. And so people are moving in and out frequently. So we'll certainly watch closely to make sure there's no extended damage from this quake. But boy, it woke a lot of people up in the Northeast today with the earth moving under your feet.
Absolutely. I know you can appreciate. I thought that it was the construction that was happening in my apartment. Errol, thank you.
I bet you did. That's right. You got it.
This is video from inside a home in Lebanon, New Jersey, right at the epicenter of that magnitude 4.8 earthquake. We want to bring in now Susan Huff. She's a geophysicist at the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program. Great to have you with us. So, Susan, how rare is an earthquake of this magnitude in this area?
Well, I've been saying that they're uncommon but not unheard of, that you do get a spattering of moderate earthquakes along the Atlantic seaboard, including New York and New Jersey. They just don't happen every day. So if you go back to the 1800s, there have been a couple of earthquakes close to magnitude 5, close to New York City. So they do happen.
So they do happen, but more history is spanned trying to get back to the last time that really happened. We're familiar with fault lines out on the West Coast. Tell us what's happening below the Earth's surface here in New York and New Jersey that caused this.
Sure. Well, the East Coast is different from the West. Out West, you have a plate boundary. You have the Pacific plate that's moving relative to the North America plate. They move about as fast as your fingernails grow, and that gives you the active earthquake zone in California and the West. In the East, you have the continent and the ocean, but they're sort of glued together. They're not moving relative to each other. There's no active fault that's separating them. It's what we call a passive margin. But there are fault lines everywhere in the crust. There's a lot of old faults. And North America is sort of being squeezed in general in a large-scale sense because there's spreading going on along the mid-Atlantic ridge. So there's magma coming up. It's creating new seafloor. It's pushing North America apart from Europe. And you're squeezing the North America continent. So it's a source of stress. And it does give rise to these moderate earthquakes, sometimes larger earthquakes. We've seen them at different places along the East Coast, including Charleston, South Carolina in 1886, Grand Banks, Newfoundland in 1929. So we know that larger earthquakes are possible.
I love that detail about how quickly our fingernails grow and the plates out on the West Coast. As we're talking about the differences, though, between the West Coast and the East Coast, I'm wondering if earthquakes on the East Coast are felt differently than those on the West.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's been well known that because the crust is different, it's older in the East, it's colder, it's more homogeneous. So once you have an earthquake, the waves just travel along a lot more efficiently than they do in California, where you have much younger and more complicated terrains. So a 4.8 in California isn't going to be felt nearly as far as one in the East.
That's fascinating. Well, thank you so much, Susan Huff. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Israel has fired 2 officers following an airstrike that killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers in Gaza on Monday. Holly Williams has more on the preliminary findings of Israel's investigation.
Israel's military says it mistakenly believed that Hamas militants were inside a World Central Kitchen vehicle after misidentifying an aid worker likely carrying a bag as a militant with a gun. they targeted that car with a drone at 11:09 p.m. Some inside it fled to the second car, which was also hit by a drone 2 minutes later. And the same thing happened with the third. An attack lasting 4 minutes, killing all 7 aid workers and in breach of the Israeli military's standing operating procedures.
At the time, they were certain that they were targeting Hamas. This tragic mistake could and should have been prevented.
The Israeli military claims that earlier that night it spotted a gunman firing from the roof of a truck transporting World Central Kitchen aid. But the coordination plan agreed to with the non-profit was not properly passed down the military's chain of command, according to the investigation. CBS News has learned the group's logo was not visible to the drone's infrared camera. The investigation confirms, in large part, the account of Chef Jose Andres, World Central Kitchen's founder.
They were targeted systematically, car by car.
The non-profit called for systemic change in Israel's military in response to the findings, demanding an independent commission to investigate the killings. US officials have told CBS News this was not the first time the Israelis had fired at or close to aid vehicles that had coordinated with the military. And a senior official said today the US wants to see concrete changes to the Israeli military's processes. The aid group Doctors Without Borders said yesterday the incident is part of a pattern of deliberate attacks.
Humanitarian workers are protected. No ifs, no buts. We do not accept the narrative of regrettable incidents.
Israel's military says 2 officers, a colonel and a major, have already been dismissed. And the findings of the investigation have been passed on to military prosecutors to determine whether to open a criminal prosecution. Lana.
All right, Holly, thank you. Well, we'll have more later this hour on the new plans for humanitarian aid in Gaza and the potential for retaliation from Iran after a strike on its consulate. That's ahead. President Biden traveled to Baltimore Friday to survey the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. He observed the devastation from the Marine One helicopter before receiving a briefing from local officials. And he once again pledged the full support of the federal government in response and recovery efforts.
In the weeks to come, I want you to know we're going to continue to have your backs every step of the way. I guarantee you. We're coming back. We're coming back soon. Folks, finally, we're going to move heaven and earth to rebuild this bridge as rapidly as humanly possible.
And Chris Van Cleve joins me now. So, Chris, tell us, what more have we learned from the president's visit?
Well, the president certainly got an update from local leaders here about the relief effort. He also spent time with the families of the 6 construction workers who were on the bridge and lost their lives when it came down. The Army Corps of Engineers late last night came out and said that they believe they can get a 35-foot deep shipping channel back open by the end of the month. That will allow some cargo ships into the port. And then they said they think they can get the main channel, the one that's back here that's being worked on with as many as 12 cranes and 51 divers. I think they can get that open again by the end of May, and that would get the port fully back up and running. The president said the port is responsible for about 20,000 jobs here in the area, and so getting it back open is key. Maryland's governor announced an agreement between 50 area businesses not to reduce their staffing despite the closure of the port. The Baltimore Orioles and the Baltimore Ravens also announced a $10 million donation to recovery efforts.
And Chris, while we're talking dollars and cents, Maryland's congressional delegation is intending to meet with Governor Wes Moore and White House Budget Director Young next week. Talk to us about the funding issues that are at stake.
Well, one of the challenges here is it's not exactly clear how much it's going to cost to clean up the debris and then to build a new bridge. So they're talking with the Biden administration not only about continuing to get support for the ongoing response efforts, but also trying to get money dedicated to start the construction of the bridge when that becomes possible. They want to have the money in place so they can begin work immediately. Some of that is obviously going to have to go through Congress. Some of that may be available through existing funds. That's part of what they'll be meeting with the Biden administration next week. We understand that'll be Tuesday in Washington.
All right. Chris Van Cleve in Baltimore. Thank you.
Sure thing.
A judge has denied an attempt by Donald Trump's legal team to subpoena NBC. Attorneys for the former president had tried to gain access to the network's upcoming documentary on adult film actress Stormy Daniels. You'll recall Trump is charged with falsifying business documents to conceal alleged hush money payments made to Daniels during the 2016 campaign. The judge found Trump's lawyers did not meet the legal standard to make the request. It was another month of strong hiring here in the U.S. According to the Labor Department, employers added 303,000 jobs in March. That's over 100,000 more jobs than analysts had predicted. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate fell to 3.8% from 3.9% in February. The latest data is expected to play into the Federal Reserve's decision on whether or not to cut its benchmark interest rate later this year. Well, coming up, a possible attack from Iran. U.S. officials believe retaliation for an Israeli strike could happen soon. We'll assess the potential targets. Plus, holes in airport security. How many people have tried to skirt past the TSA and how many got away? All of that's ahead, so stay with us. You're streaming CBS News. The TSA says there have been at least 300 instances of people slipping past at least one level of airport security since 2023. CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman reports.
America's airport security has near misses too. This video shows a Salt Lake City traveler appearing to photograph boarding passes of other passengers to sneak on a different airline. It worked until the flight crew caught him emerging from the restroom when the plane was on the tarmac. He was arrested. That close call last month came as the TSA confirms a sobering trend. More than 300 instances of people trying to skirt security just in the last year. More than 200 of them went the wrong way into airport exits. Another 80 people somehow snuck past the TSA's ID checking stations. 85% of them were eventually stopped.
The numbers surprise me.
Former TSA Administrator John Pistol.
That's part of why TSA has multiple layers of security.
Is it concern but not alarm?
I think that's a good way to describe it.
In a statement, the TSA said most of these security violations are inadvertent and unintentional. TSA immediately investigates and takes corrective action. Rare is this type of security breach. A man broke through an emergency door at Salt Lake City's airport and ended up running on a tarmac. He eventually died inside an airline engine.
Costly, but would more physical barriers help?
I think the physical barriers would, but I don't think the American people should be concerned about traveling.
The TSA put the odds of bypassing security like this behind me at 11 million to 1. But Lana, security experts will tell you even once is once too often.
Absolutely. Mark Strassman, thank you. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives says more than half of all illegally trafficked guns in the United States came from unlicensed dealers. The ATF said in a report released this week more than 68,000 illegal firearms between 2017 and 2021 came from dealers who are not required to perform background checks. The Biden administration has proposed requiring more gun sellers to obtain licenses. The rule has yet to be finalized. Parts of the Northeast spent Friday cleaning up after a major spring storm drenched the coast throughout the week. Over a foot of snow was reported in New England Thursday evening, and hundreds of thousands of residents in Maine and New Hampshire are without power as of Friday. Other areas were hit with heavy rain and high winds, and at least 4 people died as a result of the storm. The National Weather Service says it was the biggest April nor'easter to hit the region since 2020. Well, from the Rio Grande to the Great Lakes, Americans are in store for a brilliant astronomical display on Monday. A total solar eclipse will pass over 15 U.S. states on April 8th. It will be 2 decades before another is visible here in the U.S., and that one will only cross over 3 states. For more, we're joined now by Jeffrey Kluger. He's editor-at-large for Time magazine and most recently covered celebrations surrounding the upcoming eclipse. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us. So tell us, what are some novel ways that Americans will be celebrating?
Well, there will be outdoor festivals all along the path of totality in Chautauqua, New York, and Ohio. There will be screenings of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The Cleveland Symphony Orchestra will be performing. There will be all manner of traditional healing rituals and sort of Druid era dances and celebrations. It's simply going to be an explosion of cultural experiences and expressions.
With all of that happening, I'm wondering, Jeffrey, how the hype for this eclipse compares to those of the past.
Well, I think all eclipses are extraordinary events. Obviously, in the distant past, people didn't know they were coming because we didn't have the ability to track the movement of the sun of the moon around the Earth with the same precision we do now. Back in 2017, our team from Time Magazine was in Casper, Wyoming, and there were just tens of thousands of people who had swarmed into this small city to witness the eclipse. I think any time an eclipse is coming, we are reminded of the sort of cosmic clockworks, the fact that the sun and the moon are 400 times more distant than one another, but the moon is also 400 times smaller than the sun, and yet 400 times closer. So we get this perfect configuration of two equal-sized disks crossing over each other in the sky. It's really a bit of cosmic clockworks, and it's a wonderful thing to experience.
Absolutely. And if that ratio was different, we would not experience the eclipse like we do. Jeffrey, where will weather be best for viewing? And where may cloud cover actually be an issue for folks?
Cloud cover could be an issue. I'm hearing that northern New England could have problems, and Texas as well. My hope is that more in the heartland, things will be a little bit clearer. Back in 2017, when our time team went out to Casper, we went there because we had researched cloud cover at that time of year, and Casper was the typically most cloud-free place. I will be in Cleveland, Ohio with one of my daughters, and we will be having a primal father-daughter bonding experience, having this once-in-a-lifetime experience together.
That's wonderful. Well, tell us what advice you have to make the experience more memorable, and clarify for us if and when it is safe to take off those eclipse glasses.
Keep on those eclipse glasses until the moment of totality. And if you live in a place like New York City that only is going to have 20% or 90% totality, keep those glasses on. Looking at a bit of the sun peeking out from behind the moon is as dangerous as looking at the sun directly when it's fully exposed. The only time it's safe to take off glasses is if you are in the path of totality during the anywhere from say 1.5 minutes to 4.5 minutes that the moon is completely obscuring the sun. Otherwise, pull the glasses off, then enjoy the experience, and put them back on as soon as the sun reappears.
Really important clarification, because there's going to be so many Americans who are witnessing this, not in totality, but in that larger part of the country. Jeffrey Kluger, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the total solar eclipse is expected to begin Monday afternoon. I'll be in Indianapolis, and our team will bring you live coverage on our special Total Eclipse of the Heartland. That starts at 1 p.m. Eastern. Well, up next, we return to our top story, the earthquake and aftershocks felt around the Northeast. We'll speak with an expert about what makes these events so intense. You're streaming CBS News. We're following that 4.8 magnitude earthquake and subsequent aftershocks that rocked the Northeast United States Friday. While the epicenter is in central New Jersey, people across the region have reported feeling tremors. That includes here in Manhattan. Take a look at this EarthCam video of the New York City skyline. You can see it moving there. Luckily, there are no reports of widespread damage, but New York City Mayor Eric Adams has urged everyone to stay safe.
New Yorkers should go about their normal day. And I encourage New Yorkers to check on their loved ones to make sure that they are fine, not only from the infrastructure damage, but this could be a traumatic moment for individuals going through an earthquake.
John Mutter joins us now. He's a professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University. Good to have you with us, Professor. So as someone who studies the Earth and lives here in the Northeast, what was your reaction when you felt the quake?
I was on the 15th floor of a building at Columbia University, and although this is my specialty, I was just as perplexed as everybody else. We were all looking at one another, saying, what on earth is going on? And I didn't initially think it was an earthquake either, because it's so infrequent. The ones that you can feel tremendously infrequent, so you're surprised by them.
Well, give us some understanding of a 4.8 earthquake and a 4.0 aftershock, which is the largest aftershock we've had so far. How does that compare? And given that magnitude, does it surprise you at all that there hasn't been more reports of significant damage?
So in New York, the issue is that most of our buildings have not been built with any thought towards earthquake resilience. And as you know, bricks and other objects fall off the facade of buildings all the time without any help from nature. That's why we have these dreadful scaffolding and bridges over our sidewalks. The buildings shed bricks, etc., all the time, which means that it doesn't take much shaking in order to shake all of that stuff loose, because we're just not prepared for it.
Well, given that, I'm wondering what is the appropriate action to take if people start to feel tremors? What sort of safety precautions should we have? Is it better to stay inside, to go outside?
So if you can get out into an open area, if you could run into Central Park, that's great. Nothing's going to fall on you in Central Park. If you can't, you should get under some strong structure, a table, a desk, or inside a doorway. Doors are more structurally sound than other parts of a building.
And you see the importance of staying away from shelves that have things on it. And it's interesting seeing these videos even of the dogs trying to figure out what should I do, where should I go. In the moments that we have remaining, Professor, tell us what's happening underground that affects how intense an earthquake will be.
So the issue with this earthquake is it was very shallow. It was only about 5 kilometers below the surface. That means that, it's going to cause a lot of shaking, even though it's not a huge earthquake. It's not a magnitude 9, but because it's shallow, we feel it more than if it was much deeper. This magnitude of earthquake is not totally uncommon in our area. They're infrequent, but usually they're deeper.
All right, Professor John Mutter, thank you.
And I just should say, with respect to your previous guest, is that it has nothing to do with the eclipse.
That's good, because some people may start to read into the eclipse, the cicadas, the earthquakes in Manhattan, and think something's up. But it's good to have that reassurance.
Nothing to do with it.
Thank you, Professor. Well, April 1st may prove to be a pivotal date in the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. That was the day that Israeli strikes killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers, and Israel has now fired 2 IDF officers and admitted to poor internal communication and a failure to follow rules of engagement. April 1st was also the day of a strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria's capital, Damascus, that killed 12 people, including 2 Iranian generals. Iran blames Israel for the strike, and U.S. officials believe that Iran could soon retaliate. For analysis, we are joined now by CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd for our weekly national security recap. So tell us what changes we might see, first of all, starting with the humanitarian aid front, following Israel's investigation into those deaths of the World Central Kitchen workers.
Well, Anna, the humanitarian context is just unfathomable. We're reaching the 6-month mark of Israeli hostages in captivity. The UN is estimating that 50,000 children in Gaza are suffering from acute malnutrition, and aid is just trickling in. In the aftermath of the strike against the World Central Kitchen workers, the Israeli government has announced additional steps to increase the flow of aid. From a structural perspective, the Israeli government has now said that the war cabinet, rather than the full cabinet, will make decisions on aid. That's a smaller group and doesn't include the far-right, more hardline ministers who have thrown up roadblocks before. In terms of how the aid could get in, right now aid is really coming in via airdrop and through 2 land crossings in the south. The Israeli government has said that they'll allow for more aid through one of those crossings called Kerem Shalom. Up in the north, they've said they'd allow temporarily aid to flow through the port of Ashdod, and for another border crossing, this time in the north, called the Erez crossing, to reopen and to allow aid to flow through there. It was attacked and then it was closed after October 7th. The United States has said it is on track to open a maritime pier by the end of April or early May for aid deliveries. But frankly, Lana, there are real operational constraints associated with all of these steps. So it's unclear, even with the best of intentions, how soon they may materialize.
And Sam, I want to dig deeper into Iran and the threat of a wider regional conflict. Obviously, this has been something that people have been concerned about from the very beginning. What are you watching for?
Well, the global threat level is heightened in the aftermath of the Israeli strike against an Iranian consulate in Syria. The U.S. reportedly has intel that Iran is planning to retaliate with a swarm of drones and cruise missiles. That's on brand for Iran. They've used those kinds of weapons in the past, historically via their proxy forces in the region. The problem is the potential target list here is just so broad. Within Israel, we understand that the Israeli military has canceled leave for some units and called up reservists, anticipating a potential strike from perhaps Syria or Lebanon by Iranian proxies into Israel. But Israeli consulates, maritime vessels, and embassies around the world, not to mention Israeli citizens, are also at risk. But it's not just Israel. Iran has historically retaliated against U.S. assets as well. Now, we understand the United States did send Iran a message warning them not to attack us, but that hasn't always dissuaded them in the past. So both the United States and Iran are on high alert and likely trying to bolster security at all potential targets while reviewing intel consistently to see if we can get any more clarity on what they're planning.
And Sam, the last week has also been an important one for U.S.-China relations. What can you tell us about the increase in high-level engagement?
Well, we've seen an increase in high-level engagement between the United States and China over the last few months, and that's a good thing. We can't just regularly talk to our friends. We have to talk to our competitors to avoid miscommunication and miscalculation. Biden and Xi Jinping met in November. They pledged to increase military dialogue and cooperation to counter fentanyl. And then Biden and Xi Jinping spoke earlier this week for almost 2 hours on several contentious issues: Taiwan, trade, TikTok, and more. That's followed by Secretary Yellen's trip to China. She's there now. She spent the last day or so in the South talking about what she perceives to be China's excess capacity issues and is slated to travel to Beijing next. Secretary Blinken will follow up on Secretary Yellen's visit in the coming weeks, and we should expect there to be a continued focus on durable communications and ongoing dialogue.
All right, Sam, thank you. Well, still to come, the 2024 CMT Music Awards are this weekend on CBS. We're going to speak with an artist who has firsthand experience with these fan-decided awards. You're streaming CBS News. Fans and artists are preparing for the 2024 CMT Music Awards. The annual event will be held in Austin, Texas this Sunday and air right here on CBS and Paramount+. These are the only awards in country music that are completely fan-decided. Singer-songwriter Kimberly Perry joins us now. She's a former member of the band Perry and released a solo album last year. She's also a mentor for the 2024 CMT Next Women of Country class. Good to have you with us, Kimberly. So let's just start off by your take on how tight this year's competition is for Video of the Year.
I mean, I was going through the list again earlier today, and
I am a fan, so I'm going to be voting myself for the CMT Awards. I have a few of my favorites on the list, but I tell you what, I don't know that I've ever seen the category with such stiff competition. It's
You're
really
not
strong
even
this
you're not
year.
going to tip your hat at all and tell us what some of your favorites are? Maybe you'll tell us what performers you're most looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, that list is amazing as well. I mean, look, I always love a Jelly Roll performance. I truly fell in love with him when I saw him perform on the CMT when the choir was behind him. It was just a phenomenal performance. Lainey Wilson is a favorite of mine as well. And then I saw my buddies Sugarland are going to be performing this year with Little Big Town. So it's been a minute since we've seen them together, and I'm really excited to
Yeah,
see
some
that
old
performance as
names,
well.
some newer names there.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some other exciting news. The CMT Next Women of Country presents Kimberly Perry tour begins August 15th. We mentioned your mentoring. Talk to us a little bit more about what you're up to.
Well, first of all, I love them so much. They have facilitated such a phenomenal mentor program between us female artists. And it's a really, really special thing to be headlining Next Women of Country. This will be my official first solo tour. So I'm really, really excited to do that in partnership with CMT. And we're going to go all over the country. We're touching a lot of phenomenal cities. I'm really, really excited about it. I'll, of course, be playing all the band Perry songs, as well as my project, Super Bloom from last year. And tickets go on sale a week from today. I can't believe it.
Well, it's very exciting. There's a lot of, there's a lot of renewed interest and new people coming into the country music genre, in part because of artists like Beyonce and others who maybe brought in listeners who are used to a different type of music, and they see the value of country music. To all those new fans of country music, what do you say?
I say there's no song that brings us all together like a country music song, and there's so much space for everybody. It's really exciting. It's just as broad and as wild as it is right now.
All right, Kimberly Perry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And a reminder, you can catch the CMT Music Awards right here on CBS this Sunday, April 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Fans can also get more information on Kimberly's upcoming tour at KimberlyPerry.com. Well, still ahead, up to 1 trillion cicadas are set to emerge across the United States this spring. When we come back, we'll talk with one of the nation's leading experts. We'll be right back. You're streaming CBS News. Spring is here, and soon the cicadas will be too. More than 1 trillion of the loud insects will swarm parts of the U.S. later this month. 2 different cicada broods will simultaneously emerge from the ground for the first time since, get this, 1803. In all, about 16 states in the central and eastern U.S. will be filled with the sound of cicadas. For more, we are joined now by Dr. Sammy Ramsey. He studies all things insects at the University of Colorado Boulder. It's good to have you with us, Dr. Ramsey. So it's
absolutely great to be here.
This is a rare double occurrence. Are you excited about this event? What will happen when all these insects emerge?
Oh, I could not be more excited about this event. I mean, this hasn't happened since before the telegraph was invented, like before light bulbs were a thing. Now we've got smartphones. It's a different world, and I think it's going to be such an exciting experience.
Well, tell us what regions will be most heavily impacted.
So I've been seeing a lot online. People have been saying that these cicadas are going to swarm the entirety of the United States, and that's not the case at all. It'll be somewhere between 15 and 17 states that get to see any of the cicadas, and usually they'll just see one of the 2 broods. So brood 13 and brood 19 are coming out of the ground. But there's only really just 2 states where we'll see both cicada broods at the same time. They're going to get a double whammy, and you can believe I will be traveling to either Iowa or Illinois to get to see this in person.
Oh, Iowa has wonderful cicadas, and that brings up a good point, because some people like me actually love the sounds of cicadas. I associate them with carefree childhood summer days. It sounds like you're pretty excited about them. I remember playing with their exoskeletons. Other people I know are creeped out that we're even talking about this at all. So how should people prepare? Is this something you can prepare for?
It's not something that you need to prepare for. And by the way, I'm really excited to have another cicada fan interviewing me, because usually the language that comes along with this is very panic inducing. People are told they're going to be swarmed by cicadas, that it's going to be an invasion. I've even heard cicada apocalypse used, but they're just not like that. These bugs are coming out of the ground. They've spent 17 years under the ground just consistently waiting for this moment so that they can come above ground and sing this beautiful love song to attract a mate. At the end of the day, I like to think of it sort of like a rave. There's going to be loud music and hormonal teenagers, but at the end of the day, things are fine.
And loud, they certainly are. We just showed our viewers a graphic. I think it's so interesting if you compare the sound of cicadas to the sound of things like a jet engine or a police siren. They're actually louder than a police siren and just a little bit quieter than a jet plane. How do they make that much noise?
So they don't actually make the noise the way that a lot of insects make noise. When we think about crickets and katydids making the noises that they make, they're actually rubbing two parts of their bodies together. But the ways that cicadas actually make this noise, they have an organ inside of their body that they deform. Like the cap on applesauce or Snapple or something, it makes that popping noise when you deform it. They're doing that, but at such a rapid rate that it creates this swell of noise all around them. And even though they're much smaller than a jet engine, if you could bring them up to similar size, they would be able to rival that noise. And so having all of them together really creates this entire symphony.
I love how fascinating you have brought all this wonderful information to us. Dr. Sammy Ramsey, thank you.
So glad to be here.
Has spilled into April as we approach the men's college basketball Final Four in Arizona this weekend. NC State will look to continue their Cinderella story when they take on Purdue. That'll be followed up with a match between UConn and Alabama. And while ticket prices are high for the men's Final Four games, the hottest ticket through is Friday night's women's Final Four game between Iowa and UConn. StubHub says that the average price to see Caitlin Clark and my Iowa Hawkeyes are $726. Well, that does it for us. Up next, more of the day's top stories and headlines. I'm Lana Zach, and you're streaming CBS News.